All right, kids, here we are back at this again. So I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about interest groups, and I'm coming to you from my room, as you can see, rather than my house. So we shouldn't get any kid interruptions. But I know you like those, so I will try to get Graham and Bennett to make an appearance later this week. But before we start talking about interest groups, I want to talk really quick because you're supposed to be watching this video on Tuesday, which is Super Tuesday. And if you know anything about what today means, today is the kind of the most important day when it comes to the primary process because there are the more primaries today than any other day throughout the primary schedule. So pretty cool. Watch, see things unfold. You'll have a good idea who will be the leaders by the end of the day, and I would assume that we might even be at least guaranteed maybe the Democratic candidate by the end of today, Tuesday. We'll see what happens, but we'll see kind of how that progresses. I would also imagine that instead of 5 Republicans, we should be narrowed down to maybe 2, possibly 3, but more than likely 2. Just so you know, this Saturday is Kansas's caucus, so if you want to go vote in Kansas's caucus on Saturday, you can do that. Look up either on GOP.org to see if where you go to vote if you're Republican, or Democrats.org to see where you go vote if you are a Democrat. But I encourage you guys all to go out and do that, and who knows, you might see me there. So hope you get to go. All right, very cool. Let's talk about interest groups today. Interest groups are unique and very unique to the political process. They have some similarities, but they also have some differences to political parties. We're going to kind of cover those things today. So here we go. Really cool. Really quick, here are some questions you are going to want to know. Number 1, make sure I'm at the beginning. I am. Cool. Number 1, what role do interest groups have in influencing public policy? This word right here, public policy, is going to be a word that you're going to need to know. So we'll go over what that means here in a second. But again, these are questions that by the end of this, you should know what they mean. Number 2, how can we compare and contrast political parties and interest groups? And if you noticed when I was talking at the beginning, I said that interest groups have some similarities to political parties, but also some very stark differences. So make sure we know the differences between the two by the time we finish talking through all these slides. And finally, where do people see interest groups, or why do people see interest groups as both good and bad? And hopefully as we walk through this, you're going to notice some things that, interest groups sound like they do a pretty good job, and also some things where you're like, oh, interest groups might be some trouble. All right, very cool. Here we go. Interest groups, this is the definition of what they are. Interest groups are private organizations whose members share certain views and work to shape public policy. And I'm going to give you the definition of public policy. All right, if you were just to see the word public policy, hopefully you know what the word public means and also know what the word policy means. Public means for all, okay, so means for everybody. And policy is kind of another way to say laws. All right, but public policy includes all the goals a government sets and the various courses of action it pursues as it attempts to realize these goals. If you've watched the debates, watched the town halls, watched anything with these past few candidates kind of talking about what they want to do for the country, they are talking about their goals, all right, and how they're going to achieve those goals. That's public policy. They're talking about their goals right here, their goals, and the courses of action. All right, the courses of action they're going to pursue to realize those goals. So as you watch, and this is important because as you watch the primaries unfold, as you watch these debates continue, it's important to see what are each candidate's goals and how are they going to realize those goals. So we need to look past kind of some of the entertainment value that we're getting from some of these debates and focus more on what are people saying and how are they going to do what they say. All right, that's the most important part. How are they going to do what they say they will do? And what will that look like for you personally? All right, very cool. Interest groups, and I'll move my head here so we can see us a little bit better, but interest groups exist in order to shape public policy. So interest groups exist to shape the goals and the laws for our country. All right, that's why they exist. Very cool. If you need to stop this at any time, stop it. All right, but take your time. This is the most important slide. If you take down one slide today, take down this one. This is the most important one. Political parties and interest groups. How are they same and how do they differ? All right, I'm going to put this whole slide up so you can write it down as I talk, but I encourage you to take the time to listen, all right, and you can pause it while I talk here. It says political parties and interest groups differ in 3 striking respects. Number 1, they differ in making nominations, their primary focus, and then the scope of their interests. So let's talk about nominations first. First off, political parties nominate people. That's what we're seeing with the primaries. They're nominating candidates for us to vote for on Saturday, if you go vote in the primary, or on in November when we vote for our actual president. But they also do lots of other nominations for senators and House of Representatives and governors. All right, but they find people for us to vote for. Interest groups do not nominate anyone. However, they do hope to influence those nominations. And the way they influence nominations more than anything else is they give money. Okay, money. We'll talk about this in a few minutes. But if you know anything about, even Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump, and I know a lot of people did Bernie Sanders for their projects, if you know anything about those 2 candidates, they aren't taking money from anyone else. The other candidates are taking lots of money from other people, including interest groups, which we'll show here in just a few minutes. The second way they differ is in their primary focus. Political parties' number 1 goal is to win elections. That's their number 1 goal. All right, they want to win elections and control government. While interest groups only want their one issue to be addressed. All right, so if your one issue as an interest group is, let's say, guns, okay, you want to uphold the Second Amendment. Your only job is to make sure that the candidates in place adhere to protecting the Second Amendment. All right, your only job is to make sure that the public policy put in place by government is upholding the Second Amendment. That's your primary focus, is to make sure government is supporting your interest, your issues. All right. And then finally, scope of interest. Political parties concern themselves with everything, and I'll move my head here. All right. Hopefully. Political parties concern themselves with a whole range of public affairs, but interest groups only focus on one issue. So I just gave you an example of someone who supports the gun laws, all right, supports the Second Amendment. Their interest is to support and uphold the Second Amendment. That's their one interest. All right, their only job in the interest group is to make sure that that interest is protected throughout all of government. Political parties, they care about everything. All right, they have a stance on guns, immigration, same-sex marriage, abortion, legalization of marijuana, all right, Syria, immigrants, everything. Okay, so the scope is much smaller with an interest group. It's typically one thing. All right, one issue. Very cool. All right. Some positive things that interest groups do, and if you don't want to write down every single one of these, you don't have to, but I would definitely make at least some notes. All right, write them quickly or kind of paraphrase them. But interest groups raise awareness. That's one cool thing they do, is they get people excited. Whoa, my light just went up. Hold on. All right, back. All right, interest groups raise awareness on public affairs or issues. All right, so they get people excited, I guess is a word you could use, or they get people at least knowledgeable about the issues. All right, that's one thing they do. Interest groups represent people who share attitudes rather than people who share geography. One thing that people complain about living in Kansas is that sometimes they feel like their views don't matter. All right, if you're a Democrat living in Kansas, you may say, hey, why should I even vote? Because Kansas is going to vote Republican in the election. Or if you're a Republican living in California, you might say, why am I going to vote? It's just going to go Democrat in California. Well, interest groups represent people's attitudes, so it gives you the ability to influence government in a different way. Rather than where you live, you influence government by being a part of a group. Okay. More than likely, they're going to ask you to give money. All right, so then they can give that money to candidates that they support. So just be aware of that. But still, interest groups are there to support people's attitudes, not people's geography. Interest groups provide specialized information, and we'll talk about this. Now, keep in mind, if you're providing specialized information for people about your interest, you're probably not going to mention anything bad. All right, you're not going to mention the downside of your issue. All right, we'll use the guns as an example. Okay, you're probably not going to talk about how many shootings there have been in the United States. You're going to focus on why people need guns as opposed to why don't people need guns. You're selling on your candidate. Okay, you're selling on your interest. Okay, that's what they do. All right, very good. Interest groups are vehicles for political participation. This is a very kind of convoluted way to say they get people excited about politics. All right. Most kids that I see walk through my door get excited about politics because of one issue. They're passionate about one thing. All right. Legalization of marijuana tends to always be one. All right. Drinking age tends to be one. They're upset about one issue. Interest groups would be perfect for you because they get people motivated to vote based on one issue. All right. Very cool. Interest groups keep tabs on various agencies and officials, so they kind of make sure people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's similar to the watchdog function of government, or of political parties, sorry. All right, similar to the watchdog function. So if you go back through this, you're going to notice that there are several similarities between interest groups and political parties. So take note of these really quick. First off, this one right here, providing specialized information, is very similar to the informer function of political parties. All right. This one right here, keeping tabs on various public agencies, is very similar to the watchdog function of political parties. So again, political parties, interest groups have some similarities, but they also have some pretty drastic differences. And then finally, interest groups compete, and they compete for your attention. All right, this is a major one. All right, they compete for our attention. They compete for our money. All right, they need money to survive. They need money to support candidates. So therefore, they're going to compete and tell you that their issue is the most important. And a lot of times, the way they do that is through propaganda and bias. So keep that in mind as we kind of move on, which we'll definitely talk about here in a second. All right, very cool. Some criticisms. Some groups have an influence far out of proportion to their size or importance, and a lot of that comes from if you have people who have lots of money, they can make that issue seem super important, all right, by putting things on TV. They may not even matter to me, but they're going to tell me that it does. It can be difficult to tell how many people are served by the group, all right? How many people does this issue actually even affect, or does this interest actually even adhere to, all right? Groups don't always represent the views of people they claim to speak for. This is an interesting one. I'm going to use an example of an interest group that's kind of close to my job. All right, there's several interest groups that cater to teachers. All right, well, sometimes they will say as a interest group, oh yeah, teachers need higher pay, which I agree, that should happen. Okay, teachers need better pay, but they might also start talking about other issues. They might talk about immigration. They might talk about abortion. They may talk about same-sex marriage. None of those things truly relate to teaching. So what this is telling you is that if a group gains a lot of support, all right, obviously there's a lot of teachers in the country, they may kind of start to speak out of turn, might start to speak towards issues that don't really matter or represent everyone who is a teacher. All right, very good. In rare cases, some interest groups use tactics such as bribery, threats, and so on. And this is historical, probably not so much now as it has been in the past, but there have been times where interest groups did use some pretty harsh tactics to get what they wanted. All right, very cool. Moving along. Some reasons for interest groups. All right, most interest groups have been founded on a basis of economic, business interest, labor interest, agricultural interest, and professional interest. Some are grounded in geographic area. Some are based on cause or idea, such as environment protection, things like that. Some promote the welfare of certain groups of people, such as retired citizens. Essentially, interest groups are there to protect the interest of a few people, okay, or there to support one specific issue. Okay, so businesses might say, okay, we want to keep taxes low to keep businesses from going overseas. All right, labor, all right, we want to keep, as I mentioned earlier about the teachers, we want to keep wages high so that my job has value. Agriculture, we want to make sure that we have markets to sell our products to. So anyway, things like that. Okay, very cool. And then some are run by religious organizations. So if you go down the list here, environment is one we see a lot. All right, protecting the environment, all right, protecting water, protecting national parks. That's one we see a lot of interest groups towards. Certain groups of people, retired citizens, okay, the AARP, the American Association for Retired People, or something like that, I think it is. But, some are run by religious organizations, make sure religious rights are protected, things like that. Very good. This is just a quick graph I just wanted to bring up very quickly to show you that one example of interest groups are labor unions. And you might not know what a labor union is, but it's essentially a group of workers in the same job or same vocation who try to work to get things accomplished for their job. So I mentioned the teaching one earlier. Keep that in your mind. This graph essentially is telling us that membership in a lot of interest groups or a lot of unions, all right, is declining. And why, I don't know. You could say, well, maybe government's doing a better job. I don't know if any of us could say that, all right, but you might. You could say, yeah, government's doing a better job. That's why we don't need interest groups as much. You could say interest groups are accomplishing their goals, therefore they're becoming obsolete or not necessary, so that's why membership is dropping. All right, there's lots of reason. All we do know is that membership in interest groups is declining. All right, probably the most common is people are becoming disconnected to government. Think about your own lives. Think about people around you's lives. Many people don't know what government's actually doing. We kind of tend to go off into our own social bubbles and do our own things and aren't quite aware of what government's doing. So we are maybe naive to membership in interest groups. But anyway, keep moving. All right, really quick, a public interest group, and don't worry about writing this one down. Just we're just going to fly through this one really quick. But a public interest group is a group that seeks to institute certain policies that will benefit all or most people in the country. So they're a bigger focus. Okay, the NRA would be a good example. The National Rifle Association would be a good example of a public interest group. They have a huge influence across several spots within our country. Very cool. All right, real quick, a couple more questions just to address, and then we're almost done here. So what are interest groups? 3 major goals in influencing public opinion. How do interest groups use propaganda to persuade people to their point of view? How do interest groups try to influence public parties in elections? And finally, how does lobbying bring group pressure to bear on the process of making public policy? So that last question is a little tough, but we'll get to it. Interest groups reach out to the public for these reasons, and you need to write these down. Okay, number 1, to supply information in support of their group's interest. They're only going to give you information that supports their group. If you're trying to convince me that we should go to Chipotle for lunch, you're going to tell me all the good things about Chipotle. You're not going to mention anything negative. You're not going to talk about how they had, the health issues the last, month or so. You're not going to talk about those things. You're only going to talk about the positive things. You're going to build a positive image for your group. All right, you're going to make it seem cool. All right, that's essentially what you're going to do. And then finally, you're going to try to promote a particular public policy. Okay, know this phrase: a law, a goal. You're going to promote a specific goal for the government or a specific law for the government, public policy. All right. Propaganda. You should know what propaganda means at this point, but just in case you don't, it's a technique of persuasion aimed at influencing individuals or group behavior. Propaganda, you've all seen, but it's a way for me to influence you, and sometimes it uses bias. Bias is huge with interest groups. They're only telling you the positives. They're not telling you anything negative. That is propaganda. That is bias. Right? An omission of facts is bias. Okay? Its goal is to create a particular belief which may be true or false. All right? They may be telling you one thing even though they know it's not true. So there's several examples of this through history. I don't want to get overly political and tell you some that are currently happening, but I do encourage you to look at things that our government or certain candidates are telling you that might not be feasible or not even be possible for them to even do. All right, so keep that in mind. Propaganda disregards information that does not support a conclusion. It's not objective. It presents only one side, and we covered that from the beginning. It is bias, okay? It only supports the positives. It doesn't even talk about the negatives. Propaganda often relies on name-calling and inflammatory labels. So, arguing, okay? We've seen some arguing in the debates. You're going to see more, especially when it gets down to the Republicans versus the Democrats. We will see a lot more of this, all right, than even we see now. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right, very cool. Influencing public parties and elections. And I'm going to show you a couple websites here after we get through this slide about political action committees. If you've watched especially the Democratic debates recently, they have talked a lot about super PACs. Bernie Sanders has mentioned super PACs like every other sentence that he talks about during the debates, because he is someone who is not taking any money from interest groups. He is only taking money from private citizens, all right, and encouraging them to send small amounts. Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, is taking mass amounts of money from interest groups and political action committees. Donald Trump is another example of this. Donald Trump has said over and over again, he's like, I'm not bought by Washington, D.C. All right, he is not taking any money from political action committees or interest groups. He is financing it. There you go. He is financing it all on his own. There's some good things about that for both of these candidates. All right. For one, if I know you work for an interest group and you offer to give me $10 million for my campaign if I promise you to look after your interests when I'm elected, it's a trade-off. All right. And political action committees can sometimes control these presidential candidates with money. All right. They give you money, but they expect something in return. All right. Nothing in life is free. That's kind of the $1 million word. So PACs raise and distribute money to candidates in order to further their goals. And I'll show you some examples here in just a minute. Here's some growth of PACs. All right, these PACs are massive, and they have millions and millions, and not if not billions of dollars out there in the world. So I'm going to show you quickly a couple things. All right, this is the amount of money that candidates are taking from PACs. Okay, so this dark blue line represents how much money they're taking from PACs. All right, so Hillary Clinton is taking almost $58 million from PACs in PAC money. All right, Ted Cruz is taking almost $47 million in PAC money. Now you might be asking, oh man, what's this lighter bar represent? This lighter bar is candidate committee money, which is a combination of private donations, and a few other things. The one thing we know about this, and if you look, Hillary Clinton is by far higher than anyone else with $130 million. They don't have to come from U.S. citizens or from, and they could include foreign businesses can be included in this lighter blue line. So that's why her number is so high. Political action committees are unique to the United States, but there are interest groups that work outside of the country that could be committing to this lighter blue line. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So essentially, Hillary Clinton is getting somewhere in the range of $190 million from outside sources. And we'll look more in depth at where she's getting money here in a minute. Ted Cruz, all right, Bernie Sanders, let's talk about him for a minute. Bernie Sanders has $45,000 from political action committees. Now you might be saying, well, Mr. Member, you just told me a few minutes ago that Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump aren't taking money from outside sources. They created their own personal political action committee in order to take some of that money tax-free. It's totally normal. So that's where that number is coming from. Same with Donald Trump. This is his private money. So this is Bernie Sanders has contributed $45 million of his own private funds in order to do this. Donald Trump has, again, done the same, except for this lighter blue line of campaign contributions is also his money. So he's spent about $27 million of his own money to run for president. All right, it's pretty crazy. I want to show you, and I'll click on Hillary Clinton here. This is interesting. This is a pretty interesting thing. So if you go to this website, this is a really cool website, opensecrets.org. You can learn a whole bunch of stuff about all these candidates currently running for office, because everything that they take in, they have to declare. It's a campaign requirement. So if you look here, this is fundraising money that Hillary Clinton has gained. Okay, so here right now you can see that there is Faith Voters Pact, the Ready Pact, Priority USA for Action, Hillary for America, Correct the Record, America's Teachers, Blue Answer PAC, Balance of Power PAC. These are all political action committees that are working to get Hillary elected. all of them will want something in return from her. Okay, who knows what it is? It's hard to know. All right, it's hard to determine what they'll actually want. We'll look at a couple more. All right, let's look at Ted Cruz. All right, Ted Cruz. All right, you see take back action, keep the promise, stand for principle, Cruz for president, stand for truth. Again, every one of these candidates, except for Bernie Sanders and Trump, are getting money from these political action committees, and there undoubtedly is going to be something that they will have to deliver to those people in the future. Okay, you might say, oh, who's Jill Stein? She's actually the Green Party candidate for president, but she doesn't get any money from anybody. Sorry, Jill. All right, let's go back. Lobbying. We're going to hopefully watch a movie when I get back, and you're going to understand lobbying a little bit better. But lobbying is essentially a group of people that work for interest groups in order to pressure legislators. So these are people who are really good at their job, very good businessmen and women who go and talk to presidential candidates, to congressmen, to senators, and they essentially try to get you to support their interest. And they might say, okay, we will give you X amount of money for your campaign if you do this for us. Okay, that's what lobbying is. But they try to influence. Lobbying carries beyond the legislator. It goes into government agencies and other places within government. So it's not just attacked at the presidents. They go into, like I said, the Senate, the House, even into smaller government agencies to get people to do what they need them to do. All right, very good. Lobbyists use several techniques. All right, they send information. All right, that's the number one thing they do is they inform. Now remember, information sent by interest groups is what? You should be saying biased right now. All right, it is biased. All right, it is based on propaganda. It is only the positives. So they try to get you to think about what they support. Just a sidebar here: when you only follow one source, one media source on TV, all right, you're more than likely receiving a lot of bias, okay, or more than likely receiving one side of the argument. It's really good to branch out and watch several news sources, and we'll, oh no, please no, and we'll talk more about that later. All right, I think it worked. All right, very cool. They testify before legislative committees, again, trying to get people to support their interests. They bring grassroots pressure. Underline this word, grassroots, okay? Grassroots pressure. You might have heard this talked about in the campaign. You're like, what are they talking about? Grassroots, what's that mean? If you think of government as a plant, okay? If you think of it as the plant, the grassroots are the people, okay? Government cannot exist without us, the people. It should be about what we want, not what anyone else wants. Government should be about what we want. So when they mention grassroots, they're talking about people, getting people excited about their issue. Right now, some really interesting things are happening on the campaign, and I wish I could talk about this more, and if you want to come talk to me about it, I would love to. All right, but essentially there are so many people who are coming out of the woodwork voting for all different people on the current ballot because they feel government is not doing a good job at the moment. All right, that's grassroots pressure. All right, they're bringing more people into the mix. All right, so grassroots means to get people involved, to get people excited, to get people angry, to get people, I don't know, lots of different things. All right, they rate candidates and publicize the ratings. This is a pretty, you could call it positive and negative. They rate candidates. Now, when you think about this, oh, well, yeah, that sounds cool. Let's rate them and tell me who's the best. Remember, lobbyists do things that only support their interest or their cause. So when they rate a candidate, they're pretty biased in how they rate them. If they don't care about their cause, they're going to rate them low, even though they might be a good president or might be a good person or might be a good candidate for office. All right, so they only rate people based on who will get the job done for them, not necessarily who will do the best job. All right, and they make campaign contributions. All right, they give money. Money is the issue. Money is the big deal for interest groups and lobbyists. The end. All right, very cool. You guys done a really good job with this. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. I encourage you to pay attention tonight with the Super Tuesday stuff kind of coming down the pipe. All right, we'll have a lot of good discussions when we get back. If you are registered to vote and 18, I encourage you to go vote this Saturday in the primaries. It'll be a really cool thing for you to get to experience. All right, to get to vote in the caucus. All right, which is this Saturday. All right, check your political party affiliation's website. You have to be registered as a Republican or registered as a Democrat in order to vote in the Kansas caucus. All right, so check those websites to see where you vote. All right, I want to say the Democrats is Blue Valley Northwest, and I want to say the Republicans is Olathe South. Okay, but I could be wrong on that. There could be one that's closer than both of those. I just know that I looked it up for a class a couple weeks ago, but I forget exactly where they are. So check your website, GOP.org or Democrats.org, to see where you vote. And then pay attention to the news tonight for Super Tuesday. I would not be surprised if we have a clear front runner or a clear winner in a couple of the races. All right, cool. Glad to see you guys, and I do miss you. So talk to you soon. Bye.